So, if you during this presentation, if you have any questions, we kindly ask you to use the chat inside the Google Meet. If it's very relevant to what we are talking about right now, we might answer immediately. But if it's kind of more like a general topic, or if it's a suggestion for a roadmap item and stuff like that, we will push that to the end. So we have saved a lot of time in the end of this presentation to answer any question that you might have, at least the one we can answer. You might ask us stuff we cannot answer because we don't know, and that's okay. And yeah, let's get started. So super excited to do this finally. It's well overdue. So we will start by shortly introducing the Unleash team and who will be presenting today. And then we will talk a bit about how we actually work with our users, with you guys and others to collect information and use that information to further improve Unleash. We will also dig deep into one of the items that we have improved lately, the documentation, and how we have been working with that. So Thomas will give you kind of an introduction to some of the improvements we have done lately on the documentation side of things. And then we will move over to the Unleash roadmap. We will focus on Q2 plans, but also we will give you kind of a short introduction to our high-level goals and what we are thinking, but we will dig deep into the kind of the current quarter that we have planned. We will also go a bit into the Unleash community. We don't have all the answers for the Unleash community, so we will ask you a lot of questions here, and hopefully you can help us how we can provide value to the community, what you need, what we can do to help you get those needs solved. And the last one is obviously the open questions. So let's start to get started. So I am Ivar. I'm the creator of Unleash, and together with me today I have Elisa, which is the you have a lot of roles here. Head of customer journey is what we talk about you internally. You do a lot of valuable insight gathering for us. You are kind of the glue between sales, between developers, between product, between marketing. So that's super, super important role to have someone that is crossing the boundaries, even though we try not to have silos here, but you know, there are always silos. And we have Thomas. Thomas will talk a bit about the documentation. Also, Simon is going to help out a bit on some of the concrete things we are doing around the community work. We will go back to that later. So let's get started, Elise.
Yes, thank you, Eva. Thank you. And thank you for inviting me for this session today. So first of all, as Eva just mentioned, what I will talk a lot about today is all this insight, customer journey, all the customer experience that we are doing at the Unleash. Before I start, I just want to present you this slide because this is something that is very important to me, and I know it's also important for the rest of the team. We have to tell you that we know that we don't know anything. And then I know it would be a bit stressful for some of you because why? You have this great product, you can actually do all this good stuff, you have a lot of insights and stuff like that. And that's right. Yes, we have. But our starting point is always, every time we start a new task, every time we start talking to customers, collecting information from you, our mindset is always that we don't know. And the reason for that is because if we knew everything, then we didn't know, and then we didn't need to actually invite you and listening into you. So this is actually one of our keystones when we talk about all this customer insights and stuff like that. If you go to the next slide there, Eva. So this is what I will tell you about for the next almost 10 minutes, and then I will send you over to Thomas. We will talk a bit about our customer journey. We will also talk about how we actually do all this development. We're using our innovation process. I will talk a bit about measurement and insights that follow very close to the other topics, and then we have also a slide for design principles. I will not get so much into the design principles today because I know that a bit later, Eva will actually take you into our mindset when it comes to design principles. But what is kind of important when we talk about Unleash and design principles is not as we see in a lot of other companies where they talk about design and colors and stuff like that. For us, it's more fundamental that we actually want to share the design principles from a UX perspective, also inside the development. Eva will come a bit back to this later. So let's start, if we go to the next slide, Eva, to the customer journey. Because what we actually do behind the scene is this huge framework. This is just one of the examples of one of our customer journeys. This shows the customer journey for our pro customers and also for all the open source customers that we have. We also have another journey for the enterprise, but that's much more heavy. Maybe you have seen something like this before, but this is actually where we try to look into and understand exactly all the steps that we are going through when we have a company like Unleash. We have different steps in this customer journey, like awareness. We have a step like decide, user support, and also this extend, and end. And this means that this is the typical steps that the customer will go through. It could either be you as open source, it could be you as pro, or you as enterprise. What we are actually doing, we are looking very much into the friction points, making sure that we can minimize the friction. So every time we have like a bad number from one of our surveys or something like that, you can also see the numbers in the bottom of this journey. We know that this is something we need to look into. This is something where we need to dive in and understand what is actually the problem. Why is our journey not good enough in exactly this point? Where do we have this friction and why do we have this friction? And that's very often also end up like we need to do a much more investigation and discovery and stuff like that to really understand what is the issue. This could be both on the business side, it could be in part of the sales process, this could also be in the support process, or it could actually be inside the product. It could be the documentation where we realize there's some friction, something that we are not doing good enough. Let's investigate how to actually do this better. Because in the end, what we really want is to have green smileys all over the place when it comes to the journey. But we know this is a hard work to do, and we just have instantly to look into this journey and make sure that we can keep focusing on this all the time. If we go to the next slide, this is our innovation process. So when we're realizing that something does not work well in the journey, then we are deciding to actually dive into this. Sometimes it could be some minor issues. If it's minor issues, we will just directly jump in to solve it and then hopefully get out to customers and to you as fast as possible, and then start collecting insights on did it actually work, the stuff that we just improved, or did it not work? So we always have to measure. Every time we do improvements, we also measure. But this innovation process is more like when we do larger topics, because sometimes we actually need to go in and do a bit more analysis and discovery before we can just solve the problem. Sometimes we don't even know from the beginning what is the problem. We just have the feeling of we collect a lot of feedback from all you good guys and have no idea where to start, where to end. So we actually need to dive in and find out what is this about. And that is what we are using this double diamond framework for. So we will always have a strategy or a hypothesis. We will always have some kind of problem that we think that we should try to solve. And as you can see, this looks like two diamonds. So the first one is the research, and it's divided into two, the discovery and the definition, meaning that we are opening up the first one, trying to collect all this information where we can get, and it could be from PNPS, it could be from our surveys, it could be in interviews, everything that we have data points on. Once we think that we have enough, we can start to close down the diamond again, and then we will end up in this problem statement. And this is where we hopefully know this is the topic that we should look much more into. This is actually the issue, the need, or the expectation that comes from you. This is where we should do much more analysis. Then we open up for the second diamond, and that means that now it's time for us to actually go into this design mode and look into how should the solution look like. And that could be both from the business perspective, it could be from technical perspective, it could be like whatever perspective. But we have to be really open-minded when we go into this. Very often we do ideation internally in the team. It's a very funny exercise. You should try it out one day. And I would like to do another session with you talking about ideation. I will not do it today. But ideation is like, bring all the crazy ideas. If I give you one sentence, you should just bring all the crazy ideas that's come to your mind to the table. And why do we actually do that before we actually do too much prototyping and stuff like that? The reason is because if we do that, there will maybe be something that we didn't see in the process, maybe something that we were not aware of, maybe something we could solve in a different way or something like that. So once the ideation is done, we start to do prototyping and ideate always. We do a lot of experimentation, trying to find out how should we actually do this solution. And of course, you also included in this process with all the user tests and stuff like that. Once we think we know enough again, then we will start closing this second diamond. And in the end, we know exactly what it is that we want to deliver. And then we can start doing all this MVP, the minimal viable product, and we can send out to all your good customers. And again, start to collecting all the information. So even this looks a bit like a waterfall. It's kind of also have a lot of iterations inside the process itself. And around this, we have a lot of engagement. We had a lot of leaderships. We have, as we just mentioned before, the design principles. And of course, we're also setting up a lot of all this matrix and stuff like that. So if you go to the next slide, Eva, and this will be my almost last slide for today. This is just an overview of what I just told you. How do we actually collect all this nice information? How do we actually do measurement and stuff like that? First of all, we love to do interviews with all you good customers and users. We love hearing about your daily work, all the issues that you have, all the needs, all your expectations and stuff like that. We also do a lot of measurements like PNPS. We do the customer satisfaction score and customer effort score. We very often do that and you've maybe seen it inside application. You have this small pop-up says, hey, would you like to spend 2 more minutes with us? What we're actually using all this information for is not just the number itself, because that's a number, but it's actually also the comments that you are leaving for us later. We can go in and do a lot of discovery and analysis around that. We use surveys and also the community. We love when you bring some value to the community. We love to get insights from you. So please, please, please just keep using the community, because it's so helpful for us to pick up all these small questions and concerns and stuff like that. We're using that as part of the work when we are improving Unleash. I will not tell so much about impact mapping today. And then I saw Eva. Yeah. Final here. Impact mapping, won't tell you about that today. It's just a matter of prioritization, all the stuff that we have in the daily work. Of course, we do prototypes, ideation, as I just mentioned for you, and then also a lot of user tests. But in the end of the day, we are here for you. We can't do this project and product and make Unleash even better if it wasn't for you. So please keep going on with all this, sending all the issues and thoughts for us as well. I will not dive into all of this for more of, I will bring it over to Thomas now. I was very high level on this PNPS today and the customer satisfaction score. If you would like to know more about that, I can also help you later, but just ping me either in this meeting or later on Slack. This is the final slide from me. This is what we are actually doing. We experiment, we try our best. Often we fail, but then of course we also learn, and then we are actually also adapting. So thank you for listening in to me, and then Thomas, I will bring it over to you.
Thank you, and thanks for your little set of slides. Yeah, as you said, let's bring it down to something more concrete, and let's talk about the documentation. Now, I would expect the vast majority of you to at least be somewhat familiar with the documentation that we have today. And it's something that's been around for a while, and it's one of the first areas where we got clear feedback that something had to be done because it wasn't quite up to snuff. And the thing about documentation is it's often sort of overlooked and sort of put to the side, but it's actually a really, really, really integral part of your product. After all, if you've got something but you don't know how to use it, it's just a hunk of junk. You can't do anything with it. So if you don't know how to use something, it doesn't have any value. As such, documentation is like almost as important as the product itself. At least that's the way I see things. Now, as a core part of the product, it is really important that we give it the love it deserves, and that we make sure it's up to date and being developed. So as the sort of documentation owner, that falls a lot on me. So let's see how we can focus on the docs and how we're currently working on them. Ivar, would you do me the honors? Yes. So let's talk about how we are working with the documentation today. So I've put 4 bullet points up here, and they are all quite important. And the first one is to treat the docs as a product, because indeed they are. Now, what does it mean to treat the documentation as a product? Well, it means every time we get a support request, every time someone asks us, how does this work? Or I didn't find this in documentation, or so-and-so, that's what we in software call a bug. It means documentation isn't working the way it's supposed to. You were supposed to go and find something, but you didn't. It means you've got a bug. So we log it, we create tickets, and we gather data. The little graph on the side here is about 30 weeks or something, 20 weeks of gathering how many support requests have we gotten, how many improvements have we pushed to the documentation, how many little changes have we made to keep things up and going. So every week we make many, many minor improvements all the while, and we gather information, gather input from GitHub, from Slack, from everywhere, to make sure that we try and actually hear what you're saying and improve the product that it is. Another thing is, what do you do? What pages get the most views and all that stuff? Where does it make sense to focus our effort? If it's a product, it makes more sense to polish certain parts of it than others, because certain parts are more used. And in tandem with that, sorry, Ivar, I'm still on point 2. The other thing is, when Unleash pushes a new feature, it has to have documentation. Documentation are an important part of the product, so you can't just release something and not document it. So whenever we release something new, we make sure that at the very least you've got reference documentation and API documentation for the relevant points going up and forward. In some cases, and we try to, it also makes sense to have certain how-to guides or other sort of extra documentation going forwards, but at least everything that's new should have reference documentation. Now, for bullet point number 3, is the documentation should also be easy to understand, and it should be easy to find what you're looking for. Round about the new year, or about the change there, we switched how the documentation was structured into a framework called diataxis. I'm not going to go super much into that, but it does say that you've got 4 distinct kinds of documentation. That's the little graph in the bottom right corner. And you've got tutorials, you've got how-to guides, you've got explanations, and you've got reference documentations. And they all serve different needs, and they all do their bit, or they all do serve their function the best if they do that one thing and don't try and do everything else. So if you're looking for how to set up a specific thing, you don't need to know where that thing came from or how the internals work or know all the little details that you can configure. No, you want to know what are the steps I need to set it up. And if I want to know more, you can go and check the reference, which has the full, here's all the configuration details. So we're working on migrating stuff over there. It takes a while, but it's really helpful. It makes it easier for me or for all of us when we're writing documentation to know, okay, what do I need to say? What don't I need to say? How do we structure it? And for number 4, ship fast and ship often. It's better to have bad documentation than no documentation, unless documentation is misleading. If the documentation is misleading, that's probably worse. But it's much better to cover something just partly and give a brief explanation than to give no explanation whatsoever. But now, Ivar, if you do the honors. So documentation comes with a set of challenges. And the first one is it's surprisingly hard to get feedback from users. This is sort of going back to what Elisa was talking about. We love sort of getting feedback. We've got surveys and all of them. And in the general Unleash experience survey that we send out, that's where we got a lot of input saying, oh, well, the documentation isn't good enough. It needs to be so-and-so or so-and-so. And that's great. So we thought, great, what if we try and put a feedback button inside the documentation? Surely people will use it. It turns out they don't. They want to tell us about the documentation everywhere except for inside the documentation. But naturally, it's just a little button on the side. It's not very visible. You might not want to give it while you're in there. So we're trying to figure out what the best way to do it is. One way, yeah, you can make it pop up, but then there's trade-offs. There's so many pop-ups on the internet today, so many banners. It's just it's all in your face, and it's really, really annoying. And we really don't want to be annoying. We want to know what you think, but we don't want to sort of be all up in your grill about it. So we're trying to find a nice balance between asking for feedback and soliciting it and actually being sort of pushy. But now you know, if you ever see something and it seems, oh, this is really annoying, let us know, because we've probably gone too far. We don't know until we know, right? Got to experiment and find out. Another thing that's hard is, how do you handle when you've got so many users on so many different versions of the product? Some people are on version 3 something, some people are on version 4. How do you structure documentation around it to make sure that everyone can find what they're looking for? And this is another place where we haven't got the solution. The way we got it today was we got these little deprecation notices or feature notices. This is available from Unleash then, or this was deprecated in Unleash X. And that works okay for now, but is it good enough? Can it be better? Sure. So this is a place where we need to sort of try and figure out what the best way forward is. And then finally, how do you know what you prioritize? One thing is we synthesize a lot from the questions we get, like support requests or GitHub, Slack, and all that stuff. Where do we get the most questions? What do people ask about again and again and again and again? Because again, that means that's a bug. That means they haven't found what they were looking for. And another thing is just what pages get the most views when people visit documentation. Where are they going? And so we try and take all that into consideration, create sort of heuristic about, okay, what should we work on now, and so on and so on. Create a little plan, and then naturally we sort of adapt. And going back to like the shipping fast and shipping often, if we get a support request for a small issue, like a 20-minute job, can we get it done right away? Because if you can have a little push out with an improvement right away, that's great. And if it's not, if it takes longer, well, you might have to prioritize it. So going back to that, if we go to the next slide, which is my last one, I promise. What can you do? And here's my little request to all of you. Number one, if you find anything that's wrong or that's out of date, tell us, please tell us. Or even better, you can submit a PR. There's a little edit button at the bottom of every documentation page, where if you find something, go ahead and file it. And second, if you can't even find what you were looking for, tell us, because we want to know. And do give us feedback and ideas and suggestions. What is your ideal sort of developer documentation? What does it look like? What does it do? What features does it have? Who should we look to for inspiration? What is your sort of ideal inspiration? Do let us know. And a final thing, nothing is too small. I know how it sort of feels if you go, oh, well, I've raised this issue, you got 4 issues, and oh, there's a missing comma or a missing period. It's like, oh, they must be getting sick of me by now. But no, it's absolutely the opposite. We love it. It means you see things and you care, and it means we've missed something. And so we just want to know, like, it's never too much. It's always the opposite. Anything is always good. Nothing's too small. And with that, I bid you farewell and give the word back to Ivar.
Thank you, Thomas. Thank you for sharing that. So I will now dig a bit deeper into the Unleash roadmap. Our roadmap is always available on GitHub under our GitHub organization, and you will click the projects and you will see the public Unleash roadmap. We work in a certain way where we only prioritize the current quarter. I will come a bit back to that. And everything that doesn't go into the current quarter will be part of a backlog. That's how we think about things. And also, a roadmap doesn't try to cover everything we do. We try to set aside some time for unexpected work, other things that we also need to attend to. And we think that's super important when we are kind of maintaining these open source projects, and there are all kinds of needs and small issues and small feature requests, and we need to have capacity to answer those and not only focus on new features. And we also have the 80-20 ratio. We have been measuring this for the past year, and it seems to be averaging quite nicely out on these numbers. So what we do is that we try to have 80% of our kind of prioritized work items to be super related to open source, benefiting open source, and 20% of what we do will fall into what we call commercial features or the enterprise offering. And obviously the enterprise will also benefit most of what we do for open source, so they will kind of get a bit of both. And it also happens that we do something for enterprise that we later decide to move into the open source offering. An example of that is last summer we decided to open source the Unleash proxy that was only for enterprise for a year or so, and we saw that the value of it was bigger than only keeping it as part of the commercial offering. So we decided to open source it for everyone. We have a few design principles that goes into every kind of work items or things we want to improve or features we want to build. And I will not have time to kind of dig very deep into all of this, but these are flexibility. And to us, flexibility means that it needs to, everything that we build, we try to think about how can we make this a bit flexible. We don't know all the use cases that this is going to be used for. Can we add extension points? Can we make it possible to adapt this to different needs? The other part is obviously transparency. We get a lot of this for free to some extent, that we are an open source project. But again, we need to share what we are doing. We need to share a roadmap to be transparent. And we need to do these type of events that maybe we haven't been that good at, to actually share our thinking and our process around why we prioritize what we do. And the other thing is security and privacy aware. To us, privacy first is super important in everything we do. So we put a lot of thought into everything we do and try to see if we build some feature, if it's going to compromise the end user's privacy in some extent, or if we are doing something that makes it worse. We are super careful of not collecting end user data, PII and all of that, because we believe that we have a responsibility as a third party, as a provider to other software companies to be very, very careful on what we are kind of putting into your stack. And obviously security is also super important. This is going to be used by companies in production. We need to be very careful of how we scan our code for vulnerabilities, make sure we keep our dependencies up to date and all of that, and not introduce vulnerable code into our product. And simplicity, we also want the product to be easy to use. It's not always that easy, but we try our best and we try to always kind of validate everything we do early on. We do user mockups and all of that to get an early feedback if we are on the right track to something or if it makes it more complicated. But this is obviously a back and forth constant thing that we need to focus on. It's super hard to build complex products in a very simplistic way or make it very simple. We do quarterly plans, as I mentioned, so we try to prioritize for the current quarter what we are going to do. We use the first week to kind of decide the roadmap items for this quarter. So each quarter have, on average, 13 weeks. That means that we have 12 weeks of implementation each quarter. And our velocity now seems to be like we can prioritize about 12 items because we tend to solve on average one item a week. It doesn't mean that we're only working on one item every week, but it tends to be what we can deliver within a quarter. And it doesn't cover everything we do. It covers the higher level stuff that we want to prioritize for this quarter, but we also try to set aside a lot of time to do other things. And we get inspirations from a lot of places, but I think this is a really good one, John Cutler. So what we try to do is to think about our planning like we are improving some capabilities that we already have. We are adding some new features every quarter. We're trying to also have things that we do that reduces our complexity. We also set aside a lot of time, actually more than illustrated in this chart, for unplanned work. We know that we are going to get a lot of issues requests, pull requests, other things that, and also help our users. So we set aside a lot of our capacity to support all that unplanned work. And we also prioritize something we call discovery items. It means stuff that we don't really know the full extent of the problem that we are trying to solve. So we want to work closer with some of our customers or users to fully understand the new capability, the new feature, or the new user need that we need to build. And we call this discovery item, and it's kind of more unstructured, or I would actually say that it's actually structured innovation work. We try to do it in a structured way, at least. Try to experiment and learn and figure out how we can actually solve those user needs in the best possible way. Also, the items that we prioritize, they fall into, or we have decided to categorize them into 4 strategic areas. For us, that is developer experience. Developer experience maybe it kind of explains itself maybe. So the key persona of the Unleash product is obviously the developers. So we want Unleash to be super easy to use and efficient to use for developers. An example of this is that we introduce the API curl commands every time you change something in the Unleash UI. We also will show you now how you would do this from an API call using curl. Obviously, this is to make it super easy for a developer to automate that step instead of using the UI, if that makes sense. The other part is enterprise compliance and security. It's kind of a license to be allowed to be part of a huge organization, a huge enterprise, is that we also take care of the compliance stuff, the security stuff. It's the SOC 2, it's user management, it's SSO, it's permission management, it's the RBAC. It's all of those things that we need to have in place to have the product being possible to use in those environments. The next area is operational support and excellence. Super important to us that it's easy to use Unleash. Unleash should come with a lot of thought around how it can be resilient, how it can be performant, how it should be easy to run and operate Unleash basically, and have it as part of your stack without any worries. An example of thing we have built lately is the bootstrapping capabilities that allows you to bootstrap the SDK so that you can even have your application running and using quite decent configuration without even talking to an Unleash API. The last part is actually maybe the most interesting part, from feature configuration to purpose-driven management. So this is the area where we try to kind of take Unleash to the next level. This is a long-running area for us. We're going to work with this for a long time, and the idea is that today working with feature management is quite static. You kind of go in, you add some configuration, you decide how you want to roll out this feature in a specific environment. But what if we could instead turn it a bit on the head? What if we could share the data, which user exposed to what, or which context was exposed to what when, and share that data with other tools like your APM tool, like your analytics tool. What if we can then integrate deeply with those tools on top of that and get some data back, like the failure rates, like the latencies, the conversion rates for people exposed to a certain version of a new feature. And we could use that data to build some automation on top of that. Then you could go from defining and configuring very explicitly how you want to roll out a feature to a situation where you can define the service level indicators that you care about, like what is the accepted failure rates for this new feature, or what is the accepted latency, or which conversion rates are we looking for? If it's go below a threshold, what should we do? Should we stop rolling out this feature? Should we inform the developer that this new feature is currently not behaving because of these indicators? It would allow us to take it to the next level, basically. This is very high level. I will not go into the details, but this is how we operate. So we started kind of the commercial effort with employees and all of that beginning of 2021. This is when we started kind of thinking about these strategic areas. We focused very much on the developer experience first. Then we started looking into the enterprise compliance and security. Now we have just started looking more into the operational support excellence and also started looking into the feature configuration purpose-driven feature management. And this will be our leapway into extending the category to be allowed to build even more interesting products on top of this. And we have a lot of ideas. This is not a promise that we will build all these things. This is more like some of the ideas that we already have been talking about, what we could do if we start kind of thinking more structurally about the impression data and everything we do there, and what are the possibilities of that. So back to now, Q2. So for developer experience, we have decided to prioritize these items for Q2. This is obviously based on user feedback, based on issue requests, based on engaging with real users and customers. So one of the things that we are doubling down on now is improving our OpenAPI specification. So until now, this has been manually maintained. It was contributed by open source community member. We are now, and if you are watching our GitHub repo, you saw that we merged the first pull request for this yesterday. We are taking OpenAPI as part of our source code. We are integrating it into our API so that we can dog food. We will use our own specifications when implementing the front end, so we can reuse the same types even. And we will make sure that we are documenting our API endpoint eventually. This is a gradual process, so we are documenting API by API for now. But our plan is obviously to make this part of every API or API resource that we provide, so that we can have tests, we can validate, we can make sure if we do any changes to API that we are backward compatible, that we are not suddenly breaking our own kind of specification by mistake. So this is super important. I think developers really care about these things, and it will make it so much easier to automate against our admin API. It will make it so much easier to auto-generate clients to consume the API from any programming language, basically. We also will do a lot of improvements in our UI in terms of the list capabilities. So we've done some work discovering and defining how we want this to work, making it so much easier to work with all our kind of things that we list in the UI. It could be user management, it could be list of feature toggles, list of everything. We have a concept now how we want to do search, filter, and sourcing for all of this, and we will implement that all over gradually within this quarter. Other things that we want to look into is improving the debugging capabilities. So today, you can define the configuration inside Unleash, but you would actually need to connect up your Unleash SDK to actually poke around, see how will this configuration actually work. Which users will be impacted by this configuration? What if you could do that inside Unleash UI instead, or with the Unleash API, so that you could say, given this context, which toggles will be on in production? That would be super helpful. It would make it so much easier to understand the gradual rollouts, the other rules that you're applying to your configurations, to really see and be much more efficient to understand how the various configurations will actually work out in the end before actually rolling it out on an environment. All the things that we are looking into, so the red ones here are commercial features. They may be open source at some point. We haven't decided yet, but for now, these are commercial features. So reusable segments is something we are working on, allowing you to share configuration across multiple feature toggles. We also want to do more around the project resources. So today you have some things that are per project and some things are not. It makes sense to, for instance, when you have the events, when you have, for instance, integrations with Slack, that you could filter saying that I only want to post changes for production for these projects, for instance. So this is something that we plan to add in this quarter. Enterprise compliance and security. So we have the SOC 2 Type 1 certification that was completed in December. We are now currently in the process of getting the Type 2. That is much more involved. We need to do the pen testing. We are doing that right now. Hopefully this week, we will see what they come back with. And we are doing disaster recovery exercises. We are documenting that we actually are following our own policies, stuff like that. We will also do, and already started on the API tokens. We want to improve that capability a bit more. So one example is that API tokens now you can select a single project or all projects, like a star selector. But we also implemented the functionality that you could select a set of projects, like these this application should be allowed to consume feature toggles for these 3 projects, but not all, for instance. We also want to look into personal API tokens so that you can access the admin API as yourself with your own permissions using a personalized API tokens. It's quite common to have this functionality in these type of tools, and we also want to add it to Unleash. For operation support excellence, we have a lot of interesting things we want to add. We want to embed the proxy into Unleash itself. This is mostly to support onboarding new users of Unleash, and in cases where you actually don't need to scale the proxy separately from Unleash, it's much easier to adopt Unleash, basically. But you should still have the option to run the proxy as a separate thing. It makes sense in many scenarios where you really need to scale it differently. We also need or want to improve the debug capabilities in terms of connected applications, maybe, or what we are thinking about there is adding more around connected instances, requests per seconds, all of these things. Also, we have started looking into release pipelines, automate a lot more on how we actually release Unleash open source. You can read the blog post that we wrote on why we are doing this now. We had a mistake a year ago, and now we are finally automating the release process as a GitHub action so that we don't rely on manual procedures to do the actual release of Unleash. And Robert, you raised your hand.
Yeah, so you talked about embedding the proxy. Will it be possible to disable that?
Yes, of course. Again,
Fantastic.
back to the flexibility part. That's definitely going to be an option.
Cool, thank you.
From feature configuration to purpose-driven feature management. So the item we have prioritized here, so we added in last quarter, we added impression events for the front-end SDKs in the browser. We also want to bring this capability to our server-side SDKs so that you can also start listening into impression data from the server-side SDK so that you can share with other tools that you care about when a user is exposed to a certain feature, for instance. You can read more about this impression data in our blog. We have a write-up on what this is and how it works. We also have technical depth, as probably everyone has, I guess. One is super important to us, accessibility depth. We are doubling down on that now. We have collected some depth over the last few months, and we want to just fix that, get it out the door. We also have some things left in TypeScript. So we have converted the whole backend to TypeScript, and we started also on the front end. We have migrated most of the new stuff to TypeScript, but there are some components left that hasn't been converted yet. We are doubling down on just getting rid of that now. We'll reduce the chances of bugs. We also want to share data models between the front end and the back end. And again, the open API specifications are producing types for us. And we plan to, or our initial idea at least, is to reuse those types, both in the front end and back end, to make sure that we are using the same kind of data models for APIs between the front end and the back end. I will simplify a lot on our end on how we are consuming our own APIs. We also have some things, the discovery items, this unplanned work where we really don't know the exact solution yet. And if any one of you have insight, ideas, want to provide some user feedback, some idea or user needs or whatever on these items, we will be happy to hear from you. The first one here are in developer experience ephemeral environments, kind of these throwaway environments or something that allows you to test something as a developer. It could be to facilitate, I don't know, integration testing or local development, or there are many different use cases that falls into this category. And we want to explore further how can we support that use case without making Unleash super complex. Again, to maintain simplicity. And we have some ideas, but we also would like to hear your ideas. What are the actual needs there? And when we really understand the needs, we can start thinking about what are the possible solutions to that. Other things that we want to look into, I will not go into the details on all of these, but thing that is super important to us is two things. One is for the SDKs, we want to set up we have the client specifications that allows us to test kind of the protocol, at least most of the protocol with tests, but we want to take it a step further. So we are looking into now wrapping all the SDKs in a small Docker container with HTTP and a simple API specification on how that should work, so we can have integration tests for all our SDKs. So every time we do changes to Unleash, we can automatically run a test so that we can get feedback if they are all still compliant with the protocol and we are not breaking something that we are not sure about. Another thing that we are looking into, and we really don't know what to do yet, so it's more like a technical exploration. We have different ideas on how this can be solved, is the share SDK engine across languages. So we have this idea that what if we could just write these specifications one? It could be like using a rule engine framework. It could be that we actually compile it into multiple languages. We don't know yet. We are playing with different technologies for this. We will probably not solve it this quarter. But again, if anyone has experience with this, please let us know, and you can maybe help us collaborate on this, because we think there is a lot of value if we could stop re-implementing the same logic in we are now maintaining 12 official SDKs. It feels a bit tedious to re-implement the same logic in all those programming languages. And it also opens the door for a lot of inconsistencies, bugs, and stuff like that. It's really hard to do it exactly the same across languages. And the last one, for eyes approval. This is something we hear a lot from our paying customers that they really need. So this is something we want to explore a bit further. What does it really mean? How complex is it really? And what, all of that. Something we want to learn more about. So, Unleash community. What is the Unleash community? You could say it's everyone that has some kind of interest in Unleash, obviously. Either you are a user, you're a paying user, you're an open source user, you're an active user, you tweet a lot, you contribute with issue requests, you're maintaining a community SDK, or you're providing docs, or you're providing integrations, all of this. So there's many kind of things on how you are part of this community. But to some extent, all of this kind of categorize the community of Unleash. What we see is that this is maybe the part we are not the best at the moment, and we are investing more into the community part. One of the thing, and the sad story, is that we are currently maintaining more than 50 public open source repositories. And we sometimes miss a new issue request or a pull request. We forget about it, or we don't discover it even sometimes. And we also have some issues that have been staying as an issue for many years, and we are not proud about this part. We want to improve on this. And also, we are sometimes a bit unclear if a feature request aligns with the current roadmap, if we will ever implement this. And we need to figure out ways to both be open and inviting people to contribute, but still kind of be clear when will we allow you to. Maybe it could be that it aligns with what we want to do, but we don't have time. Then you can write it yourself and provide a pull request, or it doesn't actually align with what we want to do for Unleash. And then we need to be clear on this. And we are working on these things, and we don't have all the answers right now, but we want to be transparent with you guys that we are aware of this, we want to improve, and we are investing more in this. So we are doing a couple of things now to improve in this area. So maybe you, Simon, would take us through what you have been playing with lately.
Sure, I can definitely take you through the bot part. So I think Eva has framed this really well. We're a small team, and it's really difficult to watch that number of repositories. So we miss things from time to time, and we kind of hate it. So we've unleashed 2 bots on our Unleash repository. Those bots will check for stale issues and mark them as stale issues. And if we've tagged one of those issues or pull requests as requiring more response, more details in a response, and we don't get a response back, it'll mark that as such. So the intent here is not necessarily to go and close a whole bunch of issues, but to try and get a little bit closer to these things and see them a little bit more regularly. So I see lots of faces that I know the names of. So if you're on the wrong end of one of these bots, please just reach out to us and let us know. We would love your guys' feedback on how to manage this a little bit more carefully.
Absolutely.
Thomas, you want to talk about your section around the issues templates?
Yeah, so that's like, we love when people open issues and report things, but so far it's just been a blank text area, and it can be kind of daunting and hard to know what to fill in and what sort of information we need and all that stuff. So last week we created issue templates for bugs and for feature requests that are available. So hopefully now it'll be easier to fill them out and to provide the information that we need. They're actually done as forms and not just as like markdown templates. So hopefully that'll make it easier for everyone to sort of, both for reporters to know what we need and for us to get to the bottom of an issue and to help you out with it.
Thanks. But we also would like to ask you a few questions. I know we are closing into the end here. And we will also really want you to have the opportunity to ask us more questions. But we are a bit curious because we have some ideas on how can we make sure to add value to you guys? How can we make sure that it means something to be part of the Unleash community? It's some place that you actually feel like you want to join because you get something back from it. And our question is, what should we do? What should we invest in to actually provide you that value? Is it more kind of getting started guides and workshops? Is it to support you, help you, have people support each other's? Should we provide more educational content? Could be more conference talks, talk about how we build software internally, double down on how we collect feedback from users? Or should we make it easier to contribute to Unleash, like make it easier to contribute documentation or build integrations or add-ons or maybe even features into the Unleash product? So this is an open question, and I see Peter already raised his hand, so maybe you can start.
Yeah, thank you. I noted that you were listing a lot of solutions here for how, so maybe
it's meant
this should start.
Yeah,
No, but just tongue in cheek there. Anyway, we could probably figure a bit about what problems people experience, of course. I was thinking, like, throughout this presentation, which was awesome, thank you a lot, that this reminds me about that it's kind of a special model you have. I only see it from the commercial side, so I don't know so much about the other, but from the commercial side, it is that you have a kind of a few customers and customer contacts, but a lot of users, right? And so it reminds me a bit about like time reporting systems, right? Has anyone used a time reporting system that was pleasant to use? No, they are made by evil people, right? They are always like horrible for some reason, and I guess it is about who buys that software, who pays for it, and then that's not the same people that is actually then supposed to be reporting. I don't see any of those signs in the Unleash. It's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying it is the same kind of problem. So I think this customer journey, it extends out to people that you never talk to. I think. I don't know how to solve that. But it's and I also don't know if you actually have activity like that. But what I mean that you don't meet really in the Slack or other situations. Yeah. So that was, I guess, my main point here when it comes to this. How we can help and get help. Because I think I'm not alone in feeling a bit passionate about Unleash, right? And I want to help this thing succeed, and so yeah, that's where I am.
Yeah, thank you for input about the customer journey, Peter. We have actually 3 customer journeys. We have one for the open source, and that also means you. We have one for the small customers, the pro customers, and then we also have for the enterprise, because we are very much aware of, as you tried to describe, the different personas when it comes to time registration systems. Yes, it will always be some kind of organization decision on a management level. That's not where we want to be with Unleash. So we are very much aware of that when it comes to enterprises, we are talking to personas like not only managers, but also decision makers in large companies. And that's actually why we have 2 different customer journeys, because we want to be super close to you as well. And that is as you can say, the smaller, a bit more simple, and then still it's not simple customer journey. But the one that we have, maybe I was not clear enough, so sorry for that. But the ones we have for open source and pro customers, it's directly pointed, and all the numbers that you see is actually directly pointed into the feedback that we collect from you. Yeah, but please let me know if we could improve how we engage and all those things. I would love to know that.
I see we are running out of time here, so I would just allow, if anyone came to this meeting with some questions that they are eager to ask, I would just make sure that we have room for that before the hour is up. So no, nothing. Please raise your hand or say something in the chat. No? Yeah.
Hello. I'm actually wondering regarding those SSO containers that we were talking about on the Slack, if there was any progress regarding this. And how does the community fill this void?
Can I grab that one, Eva, since I was close
yes,
to
please.
Sorry, Zan, I realized I forgot to get back to you on Slack. The repos have been created, so they are free to use. Let me get back from leave, and then I'll send you a link, but they should be accessible now.
Awesome. Sounds great.
I don't know.
Thank you so much.
Your question.
Yeah, that definitely answers my question. Thanks.
Yes, Robert.
Does Unleash have a mascot yet?
Yeah, we should get one. That's a good one.
Do you have a suggestion, Robert?
I'll have to think about it.
Nice. So
Simon, Simon, is it the Unleash Ducky community repo you were talking about?
Yes.
Can I just link that in the chat then, so people can have the link right away? No worries.
Yes,
So if I could just have one final question before we leave today, I would just like to ask about this format. Was it beneficial for you? Is this something that we should try to do again? And how often should we do it? If you says yes. Yeah. At least I can see comments in the chat.
But what do you say? Monthly, bi-monthly, quarterly? What would be kind of the preferred frequency? I guess all of you are super busy.
So I'm just going to jump in rather than doing the hand thing. The thing I find inside Cognite when we're trying to build engagement is that 1 to like 20 kind of ratios that we've got here. Very few people speak.
Yeah.
But when we take the same group of people and we put them on a Miro or some other shared editing environment, we can actually tap in to that knowledge and creativity much, much better. So my take would be where there are things that are really coming from inside Unleashed to outside, and it's a one-way channel, and this format works great. But I wouldn't want to do it that often. But I'd be happy to find some time to, creatively participate in other things at a higher frequency. Because Unleashed's success is important to us. We don't. We like Unleash. We want it to succeed. So.
Yeah, that's a great feedback. So I'm just curious, how many participants can you have in a kind of shared Figma session without this exploding or mirror board or whatever?
Well, I know our record is about 250.
Wow, that's a lot.
But we're all practiced at it, right? So, and there's a lot of prep work that goes into dealing with it at that scale. So that was we had several lead-in sessions from the ringleaders who were going to help other people channel stuff up through, and we did staged boards, and then we had the final board that was where we let people where we made it easy for people to participate and provide ideas and so on. So for this sort of scale, there's minimal prep work, but not zero. And the other thing is that participants need to start getting the hang of brainstorming. All right. So brainstorming is not just a word for an activity. It's a discipline, staying positive, staying in that right brain space. And we need to facilitate that happening across a heterogeneous group of people when you do it in an open community. But open community and is a really important thing for me. That's why I brought this up, because it seems like this is an opportunity.
Absolutely. I think it's an excellent idea. And I think actually some of the discovery items that we already have planned to do, it would be amazing if we could, at least for interested parties, invite more people into the early phases to give us some good insight into the problem and also possible solutions when we come there.
Yeah.
Yes,
thanks
Peter.
for sharing. Peter?
Yeah, actually, Ivar just said it. Like he said in early, but then he added that in there, because I guess that's the next thing. You want to know what happened with this thing, and to get the loop back. And I have gotten those in when I've been part of some early thing. I have gotten those loopbacks later. Can we look at these ideas we now have if they are on the right track? And I really appreciate that. So please keep that up.
Yes. So would you also like to attend, all of you in one room, and then we could do, that would make sense if we do the brainstorming session, but also when we do the feedback session and sketches and stuff like that, should we then invite all of you to one room, or would you prefer to do that one by one?
I'm super curious about what Robert was talking about, and so I would love to be joining in a more collaborative. I think that's more effective, actually.
Yeah. I do a lot of notes. That's why I'm looking down.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think this is fantastic, and it's really good feedback. So I'm really happy you're providing this honest, direct feedback. It makes it easy for us to act on. And what we can promise is that we will at least try it. We will experiment. We will invite people to these more open, concrete sessions and see how it goes. The only way to learn is to see, try and see. And if it doesn't work, we will try something else.
Exactly.
Perfect.
Cool.
Thanks you all for taking the time. I know in Europe it's quite late in the afternoon. In the US it's probably quite early. So thank you all for joining in and taking the time.
Yeah, thanks a lot. That was great.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Cheers all.